Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
My name is Mike Anderson, and I was one of the members of the Bisbee Deportation Commemoration Centennial last year, Centennial Commemoration. And the job I had was to look up and research and track down where all these deportees went to. And it was my wonderful experience to find out that there's so many of them here. For decades, this was an event that was not talked about in the community. It was sort of a taboo topic. Today, we have a community that is able to talk about it, whether they're on one side or the other. We're talking about it like grown-ups. And last year, we were very fortunate also to have director Robert Green and Fourth Row Productions film crew down here to make the movie Bisbee 17. They were part of the healing process. It was a good event because it brought the community together a century after the community was torn apart. So what we're going to do today is remember these gentlemen. Let's take a look at James Brew. This is an interesting story because for a long, long time, the conventional wisdom was that Jim Brew had shot Orson McCrae, and then McCrae's squad of vigilantes shot James Brew. Here's the story. On the morning of July 12th, the vigilantes were divided up into squads that went to different parts of the community, and they had lists of men to round up. They also rounded up anybody that appeared on the street that they didn't know and asked them, "Are you working?" And if they said no, they added them to the group of men that were being rounded up. That morning, Orson McCrae, who was a deputized mine boss, and his squad of men who were not trained, they were not police officers. McCrae was not a police officer professionally, he'd been deputized specifically for this job. They went to Upper Lowell, which is now part of the pit. They were not looking for James Brew. He was not on the list. He was not working, so he was not on strike. He was an IWW member, sure enough, but he was not on their roundup list. As they were going through Upper Lowell, they saw the Stodge Hill boarding house and decided, well, we don't have anybody over there that we know of, but let's just go check it out. So they approached the Stodge Hill boarding house, and this is where the details differ. There are testimony that Brew came to the door and shot through the door, killing McCrae, and that the vigilantes returned fire, killing Brew. The coroner's report includes a statement by Mrs. Stodge Hill, who was in the back of the boarding house, and the first thing she heard was the sound of zzz over her head, which if anybody's ever had bullets fired close over their head, and I have, unfortunately, that's the sound of gunfire. If this is the case, then the first bullets that were fired came from the vigilantes. We'll never know. But what we do know is that James Brew, native of Scotland, who had family in Illinois, and who had worked in Ray, Arizona, and Bisbee, was killed because the vigilantes decided to just go check out that boarding house. So he was buried in the middle of the night, right there. The man he killed, Orson McCrae, got a lavish state funeral in front of the Phelps Dodge Mercantile downtown. The irony today is that we're at James Brew's gravesite. And Orson McCrae's family is not here. So, this is James Brew. Please remember him today.
I just moved back.
Got into it right away.
Yeah.
This is my grandpa. Ignacio Esquer. He was one of the deportees. And he came to Bisbee in 1915, so he wasn't coming from Mexico to work over here. It was interesting to see on the list that they had, did you own a house? Did you have a bank account? And were you married? So he did have a house, he did have a bank account, and he married my grandmother when he came back from New Mexico a year later. The story that was most interesting to me was maternally grandmother and paternal grandmother both stated that they were rounded up and tattooed. And like I said, that was never told in some of the stories, and how they had to sneak back into Bisbee and they had to use a scouring pad to take off the tattoo because nobody would hire them if they had the tattoo. Do you want my grandma too?
What's your name? Yeah, I do.
My name's Chris Scare. Beach. That's my grandma. Water on it.
Thank you.
This is the only picture we have, by the way, ever. He met my great-grandmother Rosario here in Bisbee and married her the same year that Arizona became a state. He was rounded up on that day according to just family oral history legends. You know, he was rounded up on that date. And although we have some fuzzy areas in there, we know that he came back to town, got his wife and 2 kids, and they went to California for approximately 5 years. You know. But by January of 1925, he was back here. This is the interesting part. They lived on OK Street during the roundup and on Opera Drive after he died.
This is an almost biblical story, and it is so much of an example of how this event tore this community apart.
My grandfather, Edward Leslie Cook, he came to Bisbee in 1915 out of Cloudcroft, New Mexico. He chose to come because he needed work, steady work, to provide for his family. So he came and was here just a short time when he notified his brother Archie that there was work and that he could get a job if he would come to Bisbee. So Uncle Archie followed shortly thereafter. Uncle Archie was a laborer, and he didn't join the union, but he sympathized with them. And my grandfather, Edward Leslie, arrested his brother Archie, and some people say, oh, that was just absolutely awful. It was an awful thing, yes. However, as I found through family history, he chose to arrest his brother because he knew it was probably going to be a bloody situation. He decided that and volunteered that he would make the arrest of his brother so that was the most protection he could give him. Uncle Archie ended up in California in the onion fields. I found that Uncle Archie, shortly before my grandfather died, he and my grandfather worked together in Miami, Arizona.
So they reconciled.
They reconciled. He laid here for many, many years in an unmarked grave. We didn't even know exactly where he was. Dad would come and wander and make guesses as to where the grave site was. And we finally, my son Steve went to City Hall and got him a map and all the information he could get, and we located Uncle Archie's grave. And I have a lot of emotion in my heart about these men and what they went through, and leaving their families and traveling miles and miles. And so I said, my goal is before the end of the year, which was 2017, I want his grave marked, and I want a headstone. And so that was part of my bucket list, was to take care of these ancestors that had been marked as bad. So Uncle Archie, now I feel is resting in peace, that his story is told. I've tracked Grandpa all the way back to where he passed away in Prescott, in the Pioneer Home for the elderly. My dad was executor for Uncle Archie, and he had brought him back here. He was executor for his father, and he had his father brought back to Bisbee and buried. Hence, brothers separated July 1917, reunited July 2017.
I can just add something real quick. When the filming of this all took place, I felt it as an honor to be able to tell my family's history and the history of Bisbee. Because growing up, I remember Arizona history in high school. There was a little small paragraph in the textbook talking about the deportation of Bisbee in 1917. So I asked the teacher, I have family that was involved in this on both sides. I want to talk more about it. He goes, no, we don't discuss it. It's not taught.
Taboo.
And the last thing I want to say is, if I can, I'm going to take little liberties. I want to borrow a line from a song from the musical Hamilton off of Broadway. Who lives? Who dies? Who tells your story? We're all telling these people's story, on one side or the other. We're all here together today to tell these people's story. And I find that as an honor to be a part of that.